Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Tentative transit deal. Coast Mountain and the Supervisors Union have agreed to a mediator's recommendations to help avert a strike. Plus,
it's been helping me keep clean from street drugs for it's over 2 years now.
The program as it is, the policy as it is right now, does not go far enough.
BC's top doctor says it is time to expand prescribed safe supply in the province. And
up to 20+ shots fired into his home, including up to about 2 feet away from his 6-year-old that was sleeping upstairs and went right by his bed. Quite a horrifying scene for him.
Someone shoots up a home in Surrey. A family is left shaken.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. It is a tentative sigh of relief for transit users across the Lower Mainland tonight. Coast Mountain Bus Company and QP 4500, the Union for Transit Supervisors, say they have agreed to a plan to avert further transit strikes. The two parties say they have accepted the recommendations of Special Mediator Vince Reddy. QP 4500 represents over 180 transit supervisors in Metro Vancouver. They say they were prepared to strike again if a tentative deal was not reached by Saturday. Neither the union nor the bus company would share details of the tentative deal. Coast Mountain says the next step is to sign a memorandum of agreement before union members vote on it. BC's top doctor is calling for the province to expand its prescribed safe supply drug program. This follows a sweeping review of the benefits and risks of the 4-year-old initiative. It was the first of its kind in Canada. And as Joel Ballard explains, Dr. Bonnie Henry says it is time to forge ahead.
Every day, Claudia visits the Crosstown Clinic in Vancouver's downtown east side, where she gets 3 shots of medical-grade heroin, part of BC's prescribed safe supply program.
I love it because it's been helping me keep clean from street drugs for it's over 2 years now.
The program has been under review by Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry, and today she threw her continued support behind it.
This program, this policy, in its intent, is an important part of the spectrum of medical care that we are providing and that we need to continue to provide for people who use drugs in this province.
But Dr. Henry and those who worked on the review admit it needs some changes.
I would summarize the reach of this policy by saying that it's limited.
Right now, it's estimated that 115,000 people live with opioid use disorder in BC. Yet the current program only reaches just over 4,300. That's less than 4%. But she says despite the small reach, it's had positive outcomes.
The evidence shows that this is promising, but there's not yet strong enough research to say that this is an evidence-based intervention.
The report found some of the key benefits included a drop in the rate of drug poisoning events, a decrease in ER visits, and a reduction in the reliance on the unregulated drug market. But there were risks too, namely diversion, where some of the drugs are making their way to people without prescriptions. CBC News spoke to a drug user who says it's all too common, mainly because the safe supply isn't strong enough.
Anytime anybody on methadone asks their doctor, please give me a safe supply, they're just selling it and they're going to buy fentanyl.
Despite some of the risks, Dr. Henry says it's time to expand.
The program as it is, the policy as it is right now, does not go far enough.
She has made many recommendations to the province, including broadening the availability and types of drugs that can be prescribed, like smokable fentanyl. Moving forward, some advocates say the ball is now in the province's court.
Unless the government makes very bold steps to implement these recommendations, we are going to stay in the same place as we have been for the last 8 years, and that 6, 7, 8 people a day will die.
For its part, the province says it's reviewing the report, adding that it's already implemented several recommendations. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
And coming up later in the broadcast, we'll hear from BC's outgoing Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe. She says significant policy change at all levels of government needs to happen to save more lives. More than 50% of Canadians under 55 fear they could lose their jobs if the economy takes a turn for the worse. That's in a new survey done by Angus Reid. As Saurabh Sandhu tells us, the data shows financial struggles are on the rise.
January may be over, but for many, the holiday shopping hangover still remains. And a new poll conducted by Angus Reid is painting a grim picture for the Canadian economy, with more than 50% of Canadians under 55 saying they could not handle a sudden expense of more than $1,000 in the coming month.
1 in 7 in this country say that they couldn't meet any unexpected costs, not a penny. Think about that, 1 in 7 people. So that's maybe a member of your family or a friend or a colleague or somebody you play hockey with or do other recreational activities with.
The poll also provides a reality check on savings in the Canadian households, as 2 in 5 Canadians reported not making any contributions to their TFSA or RRSP accounts this year.
Groceries, rent, just the cost of getting around, your transit pass or the cost of filling, a tank for your car with gas. These are fixed costs that Canadians don't have control over, and it's been eating into their ability to really make ends meet.
An argument that many Vancouverites agree with.
We're trying as best to save money to eventually buy a house. It's getting hard though with the cost of living.
What has changed is I am looking for bargains, and I'm looking for things that I regularly buy but at places that are cheaper.
More than 50% of Canadians are also reporting a fear of job loss if the economy was to falter.
If you're working, you're dealing with these economic pressures, rent, mortgage, food, the basics. The worry of, oh my gosh, what if I did lose my job? I could lose my job. Weighs very heavily, because when you don't have a lot of money and you're dependent on that job to meet your costs.
Curl adds the next few months will be crucial as federal economic policy remains under discussion. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
About a dozen street artists who live without homes are showcasing their art at an exhibit in Saanich. 2 artists created the Building Bridges exhibit after meeting while filming a documentary about homelessness in Victoria. Organizers say it's hard for some street artists to show their work when they don't have access to phones or social media. They say the event is helping artists feel like a part of society.
And it allows them to feel human again. It allows their souls to come back and not be squashed, not be put underneath something and hidden anymore.
You can see the artwork until February 4th. Organizations are also hoping to create a website so street artists can sell their work. A group of protesters blocked road access to the Port of Vancouver earlier in the day. They say they're demanding an immediate arms embargo on Israel because of its ongoing military campaign in Gaza.
Gaza is being bombed right now using Canadian arms that are manufactured right here in Canada, and we're trying to say to the federal government, to Prime Minister Trudeau, to Minister Melanie Joly, that this is against our own rules, and we need to stop right now.
People in the group blocked Clark and Hastings Street as well as the Commissioner Street overpass that blocked public and commercial traffic and forced delays and detours for buses. The Rogers sugar strike is officially over after 4 months. The union representing 140 workers at the refinery says members have now ratified a new 5-year contract. Details are scarce, but the union says it does include increases to health benefits, wages, and maintaining a work-life balance. The union and the refinery were at odds for weeks over the company's demand for 12-hour shifts. It has been a scary night for a family in South Surrey after someone sprayed their home with gunfire early this morning. No injuries have been reported, but as Janella Hamilton shows us, a spokesperson for the family says they are shaken.
The numbers go up to the windows upstairs. That's the son's room.
A series of bullet holes can be seen across the front of this house near 154th and 28th Avenue in Surrey. Police evidence markers showing at least a dozen bullet holes, and the back of this white Tesla parked in the driveway shattered. Inside the house, bullet holes through the window of this room, which Maninder Singh with the BC Gurdwaras Council says is the bedroom of the owner's 6-year-old son.
Up to 20 plus shots fired into his home, including up to about 2 feet away from his 6-year-old that was sleeping upstairs and went right by his bed. It was quite a horrifying scene for him.
Singh identifying the owner of the home as Simranjeet Singh Jammu, a well-known pro-Khalistan activist, and according to Singh, a close friend of slain Surrey Temple leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
He was actually just in his living room right there. So
Multiple bullets hitting the front door as well. Grant Christie lives across the street from the house. He says he was woken up to what he believes were gunshots.
You could tell the sharp crack and just so quiet. And there's something bad. Well, whatever. You jump out of bed and you look out your window to see what happened, but it's all quiet until a bunch of police showed up, 15 minutes later.
Christie says nothing like this has ever happened in this neighborhood before.
Let's hope that it doesn't escalate, but it's been a pretty calm, quiet street for 20 years. Yeah, that's sad because I saw a couple little kids leaving the house at 2 in the morning.
Mounties calling it an isolated incident.
The investigation is in still very early stages, so motive of this shooting has not been determined as of this time.
Singh says the family believes the two shootings are related, but police are not confirming any links to Nijjar, whose death Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleges has connections to the Indian government.
We are aware of the speculation that's going on social media right now, what's been posted. I can tell you that we're working with the family very closely and they are cooperative with us.
Police are urging anyone with information to come forward. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Surrey.
The provincial government has now issued an apology for its treatment of children from the Doukhobor community in the West Kootenays. Between 1953 and 1959, about 200 children were taken from their loved ones and confined to facilities in New Denver. The only contact with their families was through a chain-link fence. BC's Attorney General spoke with survivors and family members in Castlegar at a private meeting. Our Corey Bullock is in Castlegar and joins us. Corey, what happened at this gathering?
Well, you can see behind me here in Castlegar at the community center an empty room. Earlier today, hundreds of people were here to hear from Attorney General Nikki Sharma. The government finally made good on its promise to apologize to the Doukhobor community here in the Kootenays after years of government inaction. Let's hear what the Attorney General had to say.
We also talked about a package of $10 million that will go towards a range of things, including health and wellness for the community, but also commemoration and archival work to make sure that never happens again and we don't forget.
Corey, you also spoke with some other survivors and family members. How are they feeling?
Well, I think understandably there were quite mixed emotions here today, Dan. Over the years, there have been multiple ombudsperson reports calling for this apology, as well as compensation for survivors and family members. I spoke to Lorraine Walton, whose father was taken to New Denver when he was just 6 years old. This is what she had to say.
It's just this big sense of relief and emotions because both of my parents and my uncle are deceased, and they're here with us in spirit, and I think that they heard that apology because there was just this lifting off of everybody, I think, in that room, and those souls are finally at peace.
Overall, there is some sense of relief, Dan, but it's still unclear what exactly this $10 million compensation package will mean for survivors and their families. Tomorrow, the Attorney General will go to Grand Forks for another apology, and a formal apology is expected in the legislature later this month. Dan.
The CBC's Corey Bullock reporting from Castlegar. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
The Vancouver Canucks have made a big trade ahead of the NHL deadline next month.
There's a shot. Score!
The Canucks acquired center Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames in exchange for forward Andrei Kuzmenko, two defensemen and some draft picks on Wednesday. Lindholm joins the NHL-leading Canucks, having posted 32 points from 9 goals and 23 assists over the 49 games he's played with the Flames so far this season. The Canucks are tied with the Boston Bruins with 71 points atop the NHL standings. The village of Pemberton has now rescinded evacuation alerts for several properties as the flood risk there eases. BC's River Forecast Centre has downgraded flood advisories across the south coast as the stretch of heavy rain and snow melt from record high temperatures has finally eased for now. The flood warnings for Lillooet and Squamish rivers have also been lifted, though the centre says the flow still remains high. A new study suggests sea otters are playing an important role in fighting climate change. Their voracious appetites may be helping reduce erosion along parts of the Pacific coast. And as Anand Ram explains, that includes the shorelines of BC.
Life is pretty chill for otters here along California's central coast. As the top predator, they swim and eat and eat.
They eat about a quarter to a third of their body weight every single day. So whatever they're eating, they're going to have big impacts on that.
Here in this Monterey Bay marsh, the otters are part of a simple but vital food web. There's the dominant plant, pickleweed. Its roots are eaten by shore crabs, and then the otters eat the crabs, thousands upon thousands of them a year.
It was a very, very clever experiment.
Researchers figured out what was happening by setting up zones where otters couldn't get in.
So they take some essentially netting and they build little fences around squares of pickleweed, but they leave a little gap underneath the netting so that the crabs can come and go from the enclosure.
Where the otters could get in showed a dramatic difference.
The pickleweed is healthier and the ground is firmer, and the erosion appears to be less.
It's similar to the effect otters have had in British Columbia over the last 50 years. Eating sea urchins and allowing kelp to thrive, which helps fight climate change.
They're photosynthetic organisms, and so they are absorbing carbon. They're sequestering carbon.
There's a similar climate benefit on the California coast. Healthier pickleweed means better shoreline protection.
They're sort of like the first line of defense, buffering the inland areas and inland habitats from sea level rise and from massive storm events.
A key role for these predators just by being their hungry selves. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
Clever otters, Darius Madavi. And imagine eating up to a third of your weight a day and looking that good.
It sounds, yeah,
Dream.
Doesn't sound that bad.
No,
I don't eat
no.
pizza, though. I don't know.
No?
I don't think I want to eat what they're eating. Sea urchins, not whole.
into seafood?
Not whole, at least.
Come on, man.
Okay, not like the way they do. But yes, sea otters are adorable, and we are improving in terms of our weather. I don't know where that transition
Good
was.
segue.
But yeah,
Okay.
thanks. It was bad.
Gonna happen.
Plenty of rain still coming to parts of the island, but it is starting to taper off. We're starting to see less of that precipitation, and we're starting to see temperatures come down, meaning maybe some good news for ski resorts in the near future, at least in terms of those temperatures. However, not great is the fact that we're drying up at the same time. So it might be a while before we see the snow, but we're trending in the right direction. So today we still have very high highs, particularly in the south, but in the north we're already starting to see temperatures come down, and over the next few days that pattern is going to trend throughout the spread throughout the province as we see sort of a return to normal temperatures for this time of year, because things have been extremely unusual with our cold snap and then our record snow on the coast, and then plenty more warmth on the way with that atmospheric river event, and you can see a little bit more rain still coming to parts of the province, or parts of Vancouver, sorry, but we're starting to ease off, particularly for the local mountains. So after a month that brought around 150% of the normal rain for Vancouver, we're starting to see a bit of a drying period heading into February. So maybe a bit of sunshine tomorrow as well.
Oh, that'll be nice. Thanks. We'll check in later. BC's chief coroner, Lisa Lapointe, is ending her career later this month. She has been among the most vocal about the toxic drug crisis during her 13-year tenure and about the challenges this province is facing. She sat down with our Gloria Makarenko on the early edition to talk about her work and what she says still needs to be done.
We have had so many conversations about this over the past several years, and here you are. Winding down, 2 weeks left in your position. What are you reflecting most on right now?
Well, I'm certainly reflecting on the genesis of this crisis. You know, in 2012, when we first saw illicit fentanyl show up in postmortem toxicology results, and had absolutely no idea that that would result in the devastation and the death that we've seen over the past 7.5 years, the number of families that have been impacted. And I will leave knowing that as a coroner service, we have done our very best to bring forward information, to provide the data, the evidence to support meaningful responses. But I also leave with a real sense of sadness, knowing that unless we see some significant policy change at all levels of government, the death toll will continue to climb, and that makes me very sad and very worried.
Well, and you communicated what you had access to at the day. Like you're just talking about how it's evolved, and there was a quote from the BC Coroner Service that came out just after the public emergency was declared, and the quote was, "It is concerning that drugs which are prescribed to improve health are associated with this amount of mortality." So here we go. What you knew then, and how have you seen it evolve over these years?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you for bringing that up. So what we have learned, in fact, is that it is illicit fentanyl that is driving this crisis. We do keep an eye out very closely for any diverted prescribed medications, but 85% of those who die show evidence of illicit fentanyl, which the toxicologist can tell by the markers. And then we have seen other substances that really demonstrate how toxic the illicit market is. We've seen benzodiazepines increasingly, which make a medical response to a toxic event really, really challenging. We see cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamines, extreme levels of fentanyl, carfentanil. So the ability for anybody using from the toxic illicit market to keep themselves safe it's virtually impossible now unless they are using drug checking services every time and being very, very cautious. And even then we're seeing some deaths.
So now we move forward to where we are now, 2024. And in your last public appearance, you once again called for safer supply, to use non-prescription drugs. And a few days ago, we did hear the Premier, David Eby, speaking on this. He said he fundamentally disagrees with you on this. Why has this been such a difficult issue for the Premier to endorse, do you think?
It's been really interesting to see how the conversation has become polarized. So as you mentioned at the outset, we've held 3 death review panels into the toxic drug crisis, which we do under the mandate of the Coroners Act. We bring together subject matter experts from a diversity of fields who have knowledge and expertise on this crisis. So learned folks who have experience. And what they have said over and over and over is that we need to build an evidence-based treatment system. That has been consistent across all 3 panels. We need to have a continuum of care because people are at different stages. People who have not been using drugs for very long, maybe occasional use, to people who are heavily entrenched and wholly dependent on substances. So a continuum of care. And we also need to acknowledge that with over 200,000 people in our province using drugs, we cannot build that up fast enough to save lives. So while we build up that infrastructure, which is in its infancy, safer supply, prescribed ideally, but in a climate where we have 1 million people in BC without a family doctor, the capacity for prescribed safer supply has been very, very challenged. And in fact, what we've seen is the ability to access safer supply has decreased over the last couple of years.
So given that evidence, given the extensive work of these review panels, why do you think David Eby is having such a hard time accepting the recommendation?
I think it's very difficult. And this is where it's really important, I think, to have the separation of government and the work of independent offices like the Coroner Service. So while we sit in a ministry, our findings are independent, and the Chief Coroner has the ability under the Coroners Act to bring forward findings and recommendations based on evidence. So we, as a Coroner Service, the public fears, public concerns, public worries, well, we certainly hear them and pay attention to them. At the end of the day, our focus is reducing the deaths. How do we prevent deaths? And I think it's very difficult for politicians who may be pushing something that or encouraging something that for the public feels radical. And I mentioned that at my media event last week. It feels radical to give substances to people who are already suffering from the effects of those substances. But when we explain to people that those using substances are now dependent on a highly toxic illicit market, the idea behind prescribed or a non-prescriber model of safer supply is to keep them alive. Let's stop supporting the organized crime-driven illicit drug market. Provide a safer supply to those at risk, not to anybody, but to people who are identified as at risk because they are using drugs. And then have in the background building that prevention, treatment, recovery that currently just doesn't exist.
BC's outgoing Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe speaking with the Early Edition's Gloria Makarenko. Lapointe retires from the BC Coroner Service on February 18th. Do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Do you know someone who does? After the break, we'll get into why this popular game was once considered a risk to society in the 80s and how it survived the backlash. You'll want to stick around. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. A wine war is spilling over between BC and Alberta. The Prairie Province's Liquor Commission is trying to stop BC wineries from selling directly to Albertans. Travis McEwen takes us through the grape gripe.
On this wall, there's wine bottles from BC. And some of those wineries got letters this week from Alberta Liquor, Gaming and Cannabis, basically warning them that if they continued direct-to-consumer sales in Alberta, well, the AGLC would no longer stock their products in their warehouses. Painted Rock Estate Winery is one of 106 BC wineries who received letters stating that AGLC would accept shipments if the company gives written notice, agreeing to immediately stop selling directly to Alberta consumers.
It's the small guys that need the tourists. They need, and this is a collaborative back and forth. If they're going to ship them a case of wine, let them ship a case of wine. Let them remit their taxes and keep these places alive, because if you start cutting the revenue streams down and get nitpicky like that, it doesn't do anybody any good.
In a statement to CBC News, AGLC says the sales contravene provincial legislation and that with no oversight, it cannot ensure the wine is being sold to adults over the age of 18.
The quantity of those wines that are coming in from the small wineries in BC into Alberta is actually quite small.
Gurvinder Bhatia says higher-end restaurants might be affected the most in this province, but Albertans have a connection to BC wineries.
Alberta is a great place to do business in terms of great consumers, consumers that have a real thirst for knowledge when it comes to food and wine. And by cutting that off, it really is significantly going to hurt the smaller, it's the smaller BC wineries that are going to be affected most by it.
The issue for some winemakers isn't so red and white, and they've hired legal representation to fight the AGLC's demand.
I really love and respect our Alberta customers, and I'm going to ship them wine.
But for now, those wines will stay in Alberta's shelves and in the province's warehouse. Some aging will show which ones continue to be restocked. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
It is Throwback Thursday when we dive deep into our vast CBC archives. The popular role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons was once considered a threat to society. In the early 1980s, as the fear of Satanism grew in prominence, games and activities once considered innocent were suddenly causing a moral panic among some. Those against the game argued it was responsible for violence and aggression. Have a look at this.
This game has angered a lot of people, but others support it adamantly.
The game is totally harmless.
From his Southeast warehouse, novelty shop owner John Barron defends Dungeons & Dragons. For beginners, the game appears complicated. There are several characters, the monsters and the dungeon master, and the players who carry through the fantasy. Many people feel the game is psychologically damaging and that the role-playing is not constructive. One critic of the game also feels that Dungeons & Dragons promotes Satanism.
There's a book called None Dare Call It Witchcraft, who said it's the most cleverly packaged presentation to the occult ever made.
They're not hurting anybody. They're not becoming members of cults out of this. They are not denouncing their religion. They are just being normal kids playing a fun game.
One Calgary elementary school teacher was using Dungeons & Dragons to help teach a class until the school principal ordered the game stopped. Public school trustee Ann Blau wants to see the game out of the classroom and out of the lunchroom.
I'm saying it's not something I want in our school system, and I do not want it in my home.
Some critics feel the fantasy game incites children to get violent, but a university professor says that's okay to a point.
It's okay to be mad at people, provided you don't go and attempt to beat their brains out or, take practical action. Stories, games of this kind sometimes are helpful to children who feel very put down and very angry.
As for the players themselves, some say it's a fun game. And that's all it is, a game. What do you like about it the most, though?
Just the characters and their names and how many times you can be hit and all that, and how long it takes you to get killed and your weapons.
Are you going to become a Satan worshiper by playing this game?
No. No more than I am from listening to rock and roll.
Cass Rusi, CBC News, Calgary.
And we are now joined by an expert, Andrea Robertson, one of the co-owners of Rain City Games here in Vancouver. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Appreciate it. And you've brought some material with us. Yes. For those who don't know and who haven't played. Give us a quick explainer on Dungeons & Dragons.
Sure. So Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D, is a role-playing game. At its core, it's really a collaborative storytelling game. Mm-hmm. So you have a bunch of players around the table, and together as individual characters or as the dungeon master, the kind of referee of the game, all together, you're taking your characters through adventures, through spooky dungeons or slaying mighty dragons. There's all sorts of forms it can take.
Everything in between. Mm-hmm. So why do you think there was a bit of a moral panic among some people and how it got linked to Satanism? Unfair or not?
Spoilers, they weren't summoning any real demons.
Okay, there you go, kids.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of fear of the new. Mm-hmm. It was new and different and weird. Mm-hmm. You're rolling these arcane-looking things.
7, 8, 9, 10-sided dice, a bunch of numbers on them.
So you have these weird-looking things. The early adopters of Dungeons & Dragons also tended to be people who maybe didn't find belonging in sports or the more traditional kind of things. And so you have, and I say it lovingly, the weirdos playing this game together. Who knows what they're up to? The book looks kind of scary. And it all just kind of steamrolled into
And it sort of played into it. And we know we've seen this on, for example, shows like The Big Bang Theory, where the described and perhaps prescribed nerds are playing Dungeons & Dragons passionately. Do some of the stereotypes and still linger about the game, or have people moved on mostly?
People have mostly moved on. The player base for Dungeons & Dragons these days is incredibly wide. You have a diversity of genders and races, identities across the board. It's really a welcoming community, and you can be anyone in real life, and you can be anyone in the game. There's a seat for everyone at the table.
And at Rain City Games, how popular is it? Do people come in and play?
Yes. Yep.
Really?
We have in-store D&D campaigns. We have one just finishing up right now with a bunch of school kids. So, schools and parents have embraced Dungeons & Dragons as a way to get their kids, practicing math, but also practicing, collaborative, team building, community building kind of stuff.
It's a teaching tool.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. Andrea Robertson, we really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for sharing Dungeons and Dragons with us.
Of course, thank you.
It is a sweeping policy change that Alberta's premier says is meant to protect children and keep parents in the know. Why some are calling it a step too far after this.
Here comes the bubbles. These kids are happy it's playtime. Some PEI parents would be happy too if they could get a spot here, but there are waiting lists almost everywhere.
We do get emails and phone calls every single day looking for childcare spaces, and right now I'm licensed for 60 and I'm maxed.
Oh, we like these. There are new rules now that allow centers to take in more children. Each one can now have up to 125 if they have the staff and space to do it. That's up from a maximum of 80. And if infant rooms are big enough, they can take up to 12.
I think that it will make some difference for sure in the number of spaces that are available to parents, but it really is an approach where it's not going to be just one change.
Government says there's money to help with expansions. This center would like to, but can't. It doesn't have the space. It's hoping some city land next door could be purchased.
So I do wish the opportunity was there to expand to help the registry.
Another daycare says government programs aren't good enough to help daycares become bigger.
And we have the layout of the center. We have the contractor. We don't have the money. So it's not only crushing us, it's crushing the 200 parents that are on the wait list.
A legislative committee this week heard about efforts to create more childcare spots. Staffing requirements have also changed to allow centers to hire people with other education beyond early years training. That makes it easier to find staff. But that lack of physical space is the biggest issue.
So we're always on the lookout for suitable spaces that can either allow a center to expand their current facility or create a new facility. We're always on the lookout.
If they're not able to get the more spaces in place to meet the needs of people, then it has an impact on our workforce. It has an impact on, once again, the level of early years learning that some children may be getting. There didn't seem to be a lot of real significant movement on the amount of spaces that will be available.
Early years education officials say they have identified one building which could be turned into a center, and there is a commitment to build a new one as well. They say several centers have applied to expand, but they couldn't say when that official registry wait list of 2,000 people would get smaller. Laura Meter, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has formally unveiled sweeping and controversial gender policies for children, youth, and adults. As Joe Horwood explains, the changes have triggered an immediate backlash and the threat of legal action.
Today I wish to address a very sensitive issue involving our children and gender identity.
From surgeries to sports, even the name a teenager chooses to go by. The United Conservative government is transforming gender policies in Alberta.
Prematurely encouraging or enabling children to alter their very biology or natural growth, no matter how well-intentioned and sincere, poses a risk to that child's future that I, as Premier, am not comfortable with permitting in our province.
The measures will ban provincially funded gender-affirming surgeries for Albertans 17 and under. Teens between 16 and 17 will only be allowed access to gender-affirming care with the approval of a parent, physician, and psychologist. Those ages won't need permission to use a different name or pronouns, but schools do have to inform parents, and kids 15 and under will need to ask their parents to sign off.
In rare circumstances, when transgender children experience an abusive parent, there are, of course, child protection laws that will be enforced.
Today, Smith promised trans Albertans,
I support you in becoming the person that you want to be or who you already are. And as Premier of this province, I will ensure your rights are always protected.
But some advocates have little confidence in that promise. Late Wednesday, the Skipping Stone Foundation and Egal Canada announced their intention to challenge the new rules in court to keep their communities safe.
This is an extremely cruel law that will harm immensely trans kids across the province.
Ashley says a constitutional challenge could depend on how the province proceeds with legislation.
If they do not use the notwithstanding clause, then what we'll primarily be looking at is Section 7, which is the right to life, liberty, and security of the person under the Canadian Charter. We also have Section 15, right to equality. And in Saskatchewan, we're also even exploring Section 12, right to be free from cruel and unusual treatment or punishment.
When asked if legislating these changes could infringe on charter rights or the Canada Health Act, Smith said that's for the lawyers to debate. Joe Horwitz, CBC News, Calgary.
About 4 million Canadians have criminal records. And as Mike Crawley explains, a new report finds many businesses are not willing to hire people who've had a prior conviction despite a nationwide labor shortage.
Comeback Snacks is a small Ontario company that ships its flavored popcorn across the country. Emily O'Brien is its founder and CEO. She came up with the idea for her business when she was in prison.
For smuggling narcotics into Canada. But I still believed myself and I knew it wasn't the end.
O'Brien also knew that after getting out, finding a job could be a big challenge.
How can I make a comeback? How can I turn this around? And as I was talking with my other fellow inmates, I realized that we all had so much potential and we all just needed another chance.
O'Brien launched her business in 2020 and since then has hired 8 people who had criminal records, giving them part-time marketing jobs.
They have been the best. Like, they have been so reliable.
That approach makes her something of an exception in Canada. Researchers commissioned by the John Howard Society of Ontario interviewed HR managers across Canada. Nearly half said they absolutely will not hire someone with any criminal record.
They would discard that application, and it didn't matter whether the record was old, what type of offense it was, whether it was relevant to the position.
Policy analyst Safia Hussein points to research from the US and other countries suggesting companies who refuse to hire workers with records may be missing out.
People with past criminal justice involvement have lower turnover, equal or better performance, equal or lower recruitment costs, and there's no difference in terms of risk of misconduct.
It's bringing calls for governments across Canada to take action.
Introduce a tax incentive for employers to hire people with criminal records. We think that this would go a long way to giving employers just that added boost to go and make that hire.
The human rights codes in British Columbia, Quebec, and Newfoundland and Labrador now prohibit workplace discrimination against people whose criminal records are unrelated to their job. The John Howard Society's report urges all provinces to do the same. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Vaughan, Ontario.
It will soon cost you more to watch your favorite streaming shows without ads. Coming up, how much customers will have to pay and why the golden age of streaming may be nearing its end. Stay with us.
We're a family of 10, 5 girls and 5 boys, children of Raymond and Doris Tremblay. And how the dictionary got started, it actually came to my mind about 3.5 years ago when COVID hit. And we were all in our homes, couldn't go anywhere. Now I remember looking at my materials on language and I thought, I have so much stuff here. What am I going to do with this? So the family theme dictionary came to my mind. I thought, you know what? We're all speakers, every one of us. Why don't we do a dictionary and then we can get it out there to share with everybody? It's online. It looks like it's quite popular from what I see so far.
Like we're all 60-some years old and over, so now is the time for us to share. And I was so happy when my sister thought of this, and it gave me, like every day, it gave me, when she asked me to record.
What
really got to me was how many speakers we have left. I said, Dan, you know, we got to do something about this. And when Roseanne brought this up, I said, I'm in. I'm all in.
Every household you went into, you would hear our language, minus the church and the day school, but everywhere else you heard our language fluently. We even had war brides coming in who had to learn the language.
But anyway, everybody had a laptop, and it was set up so that they're at home and they're able to record. And that was another big thing with this for me. I thought, this is not going out until there's audio.
And there was one time Alan recorded a whole bunch of words. It was a rainy day. That's all you heard in the background. When there was Alan saying the word.
How many of you guys are in the school system or have been in the school system?
Zagalida Hasawagan. Zagalausawagan. Zagaligaboausawagan. There's 19,432 entries.
Our language came from Wolustov, which is the river, which is our land, and all the bases of and the root part of our language comes from the land and from that river, and it's beautiful.
Wabanakiig.
Wabanakiig.
A high-profile, high-bid auction is underway online. The prize isn't jewelry, a painting, or a Fabergé egg. It's a box of hockey cards. Jason Warwick explains why it's no ordinary collection.
Hockey cards, a childhood obsession for many of us. Gems like Mike Bossy, Ray Bourque, Doug Gilmour, or Mark Messier. Or greats like Stan Mikita, Gordie Howe, or Terry Sawchuk discovered in your grandparents' basement. A few of us got lucky and contained a pack that opened the ultimate prize, a 1979 Wayne Gretzky O-Pee-Chee rookie card. Cards like this with rounded corners and other imperfections are likely worth only a few $100s.
On the other hand, mint-condition Gretzky rookie cards can fetch more than $100,000. One recently sold for nearly $4 million. That's why the card collector community is buzzing about a Saskatchewan family's discovery. In their Regina home, they found a large box, and inside, more than a dozen other boxes, all completely sealed. Thousands of 1979 O-Pee-Chee cards.
To come across a find like this is super rare, regardless of your location. And so, yeah, I was pretty excited to hear about it.
They've put the whole thing up for auction, and some estimate there could be more than 24 of those coveted Gretzky rookie cards inside.
Oh, it was incredible. I think the exact words I said and texted back to him was, "Oh my God." No one had ever seen one of these cases before. No one has even heard of one or pictured one before. So when I had seen it, I was floored.
Simon's had it carefully packaged and shipped to the U.S. In less than a week, the bidding has already topped $1.3 million. Haney says the boxes look brand new.
They look immaculate, like they look super white, so there's no Doesn't look like there's any humidity issues, and obviously no, yellowing from like any sort of light.
The family is asking to remain anonymous. It's unclear what a buyer will do with the box. Keep it closed, open a few of the smaller boxes, or open them all and carefully extract any Gretzky cards. But one thing is clear, this rare discovery is unlike any other. And sports fans and collectors, they'll be watching. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Saskatoon.
So cool. Full disclosure, I collected hockey cards and baseball cards as a slightly younger person. And to find something like that would be madness. So cool. Check your parents' and grandparents' basements, people, and then let me know. Darius, what's going to happen with weather?
Lots, and I will say I did not collect hockey cards, but I would like $100,000. So
yeah,
same,
we'll get on
same
that.
thing, right?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Well, in terms of weather, we have a little bit more rain coming to the south coast, primarily hitting the central parts of the island, potentially spreading up a little bit further north, although it doesn't seem to be right now. If over the next 24 hours, after that rain starts to clear up and we start to see a little bit more snow on some of the local mountain or south coast mountain ranges because those temperatures are coming down, we pretty much dry up for the days ahead. So that's really all the activity we're going to see. After that, we're going to have a pretty consistently boring forecast, meaning my days will be a little bit lighter. In the days ahead, or the day ahead, singular, now we can say, the south coast going to get a little bit more rain. For the most part, we're seeing some snow in parts of the province as, again, the cooler temperatures start to spread, and you can see that snow spread as well from what was looking like a lot of rain even in places like down in the southeast where we'd typically be seeing lots of snow at this time of year. We are seeing a little bit too much rain for it to be seasonal, So if we zoom in on the south coast here, you can see where we're going to get a little bit more rain, but really we're not looking at too much more. We're looking at really just a fraction of what we've seen the last few days. And if we zoom in on Vancouver, even at higher elevations, it's not looking like much more than 10, 20 millimeters of rain, even for the North Shore. So it's not looking too bad in the days ahead as we have a bit of a calm period after the real storm that we had. Now, in terms of conditions across the province, again, pretty calm, a little bit more rain coming, but even here, it's mostly a chance of showers for most places, with the exception of the east and west coasts of the central part of the island, even north of Nanaimo, really, which only has a chance of showers as well, and then up and down the coast, looking like just some activity there, especially snow up in the northwest. For the most part, not too bad. In terms of freezing levels, they are starting to come down. They start to hover a little bit over the weekend, but they do start to come down again early next week. So we should see a return to the normal freezing levels. And if we get some precipitation, that might mean some snow to top off the local mountains, which we could really use, because for now, it's not looking too great in the days ahead. What we do get in the next 24 hours is really just rain, and then we pretty much dry up across the local mountain ranges. So if we look at our Vancouver forecast, one more day of rain, which is really just showers possible across most of Metro Vancouver. Showers unlikely Saturday, but it's a very small possibility of a drizzle. And then those temperatures drop overnight on Sunday, and we get a pretty consistent dry forecast.
February is changing. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Next week, it is going to cost you a little bit more to watch Amazon Prime Video uninterrupted. It's the latest streaming service to add commercials. As Anise Dari tells us, some say cheap ad-free streaming may be a thing of the past.
Amazon Prime Video won't be commercial-free much longer unless you pay more.
If I'm still paying and they're putting ads, then for me that's absolute no-go. Like if I'm paying money, I don't see any ads at all.
I hate having to be forced to pay to not have advertisement in my face. There's so many subscriptions, it's getting so expensive already.
It'll cost $3 more a month to avoid ads. If customers don't pay up, ads begin on Monday. Experts predict either way, it will be lucrative for Amazon.
You look at the majority of their business, which is really the e-commerce business, a grocery business, a retail business. The margins on that business are 2%. The margins on advertising for Amazon is upwards of 50%.
Netflix made similar moves over the past year. Higher prices for ad-free content. And at Bell Media's Crave, price hikes to keep commercials away.
People don't like ads, but people really don't like bad, irrelevant advertising.
But this ad exec says customers won't mind if commercials are targeted.
And if you give people the right ad at the right time, it's actually a really good trade-off for folks. Another example is the Super Bowl. Nobody likes ads, but everybody watches a Super Bowl ad.
If consumers want to keep their streaming ad-free, they may have to turn off the TV and cancel.
Because this is a kind of new thing, these companies are going to be watching the metrics very closely.
And so this is kind of now's the time. If you want to try to make a difference, vote with your dollars.
So far, those votes have led to more commercials, at least at Amazon's competitors. YouTube gained more than $1 billion in ad revenue in just 1 year. And at Netflix, 40% of new signups have also said yes to ads. Anis Hidari, CBC News, Calgary.
February is Black History Month, and people mark it in many different ways. Why some Vancouver artists celebrate the month through drag. After the break.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
This is Vancouver Island is the brand new podcast that explores stories of island life. Each week, host Catherine Marlowe looks at the joys and challenges of living on the island. Subscribe on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. And BC Today is the call-in show where British Columbians make their voices heard. And now you can watch it on television, stream it on CBC Gem, and hear it on CBC Radio 1 and CBC Listen.
Today is the start of Black History Month, and we're going to be bringing you stories throughout this month celebrating it.
On Saturday, the Visible Drag Brunch is taking place in downtown Vancouver, featuring an all-black cast of drag performers. Drag stars Kendall Gender and Rich L. gave the CBC's Amy Bell a sneak peek.
Tell us a little bit about what visible means.
Yeah, so Visible is actually an event that I've been doing in Vancouver since about 2017.
Okay.
And for me, it was sort of built out of a necessity that I felt as a drag performer in the scene. I just felt like there wasn't a space where I felt comfortable or I wanted to express my racial identity. And something kind of clicked off and was like, I wonder if other performers are feeling this way as well. So, we kicked it off in 2017 and, Rich L has actually been a part of it since the very beginning, which is really cool. We went through many iterations of it through the pandemic and all of this kind of stuff. We went online and we did the whole thing. So for me, visibility is it's super important. I think visibility really saves lives in a lot of ways because I think it's a way to feel interconnected with other people when you see yourself reflected in another person.
Yeah, and everybody deserves and needs to have that. What will be happening at this event? What can people look forward to seeing?
Ooh, it's going to be an array of a bunch of different performances. I kind of leave the stage open to the performers, whether they want to dive into their identity or honestly just showcase something that is, just like fun or uplifting. It's really up to them, and drag brunch is an amazing time. If you haven't been to a drag brunch, you are missing out.
I can't think of two better things, drag and brunch. They're both glorious, so why not put them together?
Who doesn't love brunch?
Yes.
Well, if we saw them in the makeup room earlier, and if I didn't want to go to that drag brunch before, I do now.
Oh my gosh, Drag Stars Mimosas. We're ready to go.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.